The morning sun rose over the frost-hardened fields, turning the fences to lines of gold. Smoke curled from the chimney of a weather-beaten farmhouse, its paint long surrendered to wind and rain. Inside, Samuel Keene sat at the table, calloused hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee gone cold. His eyes, the color of tired earth, stared out the window at the empty pasture. The silence pressed close. Once, that same field had thunder with hooves, laughter, and the sound of his wife humming as she brushed the horses. Now only the wind moved, whispering through the dry grass like a memory that refused to die. He rose slowly, joints stiff from years of work that never ended. The barn door groaned when he pushed it open, revealing rows of tools too old to shine in stalls that smelled faintly of dust and hay. A faded photograph hung by a nail, Clara, smiling beside a chestnut mare, sunlight caught in her hair. She had been gone 5 years, taken by illness that neither medicine nor prayer could stop. Samuel had buried her beneath the willow at the edge of the property, where the roots curved around her grave like arms refusing to let go. Every morning he paused there before starting his chores, whispering, "Morning, love," as though she still listened. The ranch, Willow Bend, had once been the pride of the county. Now it was a place time forgot. Fences leaning, roof patched with tin, debt stacked higher than the hayloft. But Samuel refused to sell, not while Clara's voice still lived in the back of his mind. "Promise me you'll keep the land," she'd said, her hand trembling against his. "It'll breathe again someday." He'd promised, and that promise was the only thing that kept him upright. By mid-morning, the sound of an old pickup rattled down the dirt road. Benji, the neighbor's boy, jumped out before it stopped moving, lanky and sunburned, his smile too wide for his face. "Morning, Mr. Keene. You said the south fence needed mending." Samuel nodded. "You don't have to come every day, Ben." The boy shrugged. "I like it here better than town. Feels real." Samuel almost smiled at that. They worked side by side until the sun tilted west. Between hammer strikes, Benji chattered about the county fair, the horse auctions, the ranchers showing off their bloodlines. Samuel listened without comment until the boy mentioned a name: Silver Wind, a young stallion from the River Fire line, known for speed and steadiness, rumored to be the last of his kind. The words hung in the air like a spark near dry wood. Samuel straightened. "You say they're auctioning him?" Benji nodded. "Next week in Pine Hollow. Folks say he'll fetch a fortune." That night, Samuel lay awake listening to the creak of the old house. The thought of the horse wouldn't leave him. He imagined Silver Wind running through his fields, mane like smoke, power in every stride. A horse like that could bring life back to Willow Bend, could make the land breathe again. He reached for the coat hanging by the door and felt the envelope tucked inside, worn soft from years of unfolding. Clara's handwriting still clear. "Promise me, Sam." He whispered into the dark, "I'm trying, love. Maybe this is how." The next morning, he drove into town. The bank's brick walls rose against the winter sky, formal and cold. Inside, he met Martha Hensley, who ran the feed store across the street. She was waiting with a kind smile and a thermos of coffee. "Heard about that River Fire colt," she said. "You thinking of bidding?" He hesitated, then nodded once. "Thinking, yes. Paying. Now that's another matter." She looked at him for a long moment, then pressed a small leather charm into his palm. "Was my husband's. Brought him luck in the war. Maybe it'll bring you some, too." Outside, snow began to fall, soft, steady flakes landing on his coat, the kind that melts slow enough to feel their weight. Samuel looked toward the horizon where the road to Pine Hollow curved between hills. For the first time in years, he felt something flicker inside him that wasn't loss. He closed his hand around the charm, climbed into his truck, and drove toward whatever hope still waited beyond the frost. The town of Pine Hollow was half buried under snow when Samuel arrived, the streets gleaming white beneath a sky the color of steel. His old truck sputtered before settling into silence, its engine ticking in the cold. He stepped out, straightened his jacket, and crossed the street toward the modest brick building with the faded sign, First County Bank. Inside, warmth met him along with the faint scent of polished wood and paper. He removed his hat, nodding politely to the clerk at the counter. His boots left small patches of melted snow on the floor, marking his slow steps toward the office door where his future waited. The manager, a thin man with spectacles perched low on his nose, greeted him without warmth. "Mr. Keene," he said, adjusting his tie. "We received your notice. You're here to finalize the payment for the animal." Samuel nodded and slid the envelope forward. Every bill inside had a story: odd jobs, sleepless nights, and the weight of his wife's memory. "All there," he said quietly. The manager counted without expression, the shuffle of paper loud in the silence. Then, with mechanical nod, he stamped the receipt and handed it back. "Congratulations, Mr. Keene. The horse will be released once the payment is logged in the system." Samuel exhaled slowly, his chest tight. For a moment, the world softened. He imagined Silver Wind running to the pasture at Willow Bend, hooves striking thawing earth, mane alive in a wind. He imagined the ranch breathing again, not as it was before Clara's death, but as something reborn, rougher, humbler, still alive. He thanked the manager and turned toward the door, the receipt folded carefully in his coat pocket. Outside, snow drifted down in slow spirals. Martha waited near her store across the street, hands tucked into her coat sleeves. When she saw his expression, she smiled. "So it's done?" He nodded, unable to trust his voice. "Then go home, Sam," she said. "Rest for once. The world might surprise you yet." He drove home as the sun fell behind the hills, the truck's headlights cutting through the dusk. At the edge of the property, he stopped by the willow tree and spoke softly to the grave beneath it. "We did it, Clara. The horse is ours now." The wind moved through the branches as if answering back, a sound like her name. That night, the house felt different. He set the receipt on the table, lit the lantern, and stared at the flickering flame. He could almost hear hooves on the dirt, the echo of life returning. Sleep came easily for the first time in years. The next morning, the phone rang before dawn. He answered with a rough voice, still half dreaming. On the line was Martha, her tone trembling. "Sam, they say the horse isn't coming." He blinked, confused. "What do you mean, isn't coming?" A pause, and "They sent it to Drummond Ranch." The name cut like cold iron. Caleb Drummond, his neighbor, his rival, the man who'd once loved Clara before life drew its cruel lines. Samuel sat down slowly, the floor seeming to shift beneath him. "There's a mistake," he said. But when he called the auction house, a polite voice confirmed the impossible. "Sir, according to our records, ownership transferred to Mr. Caleb Drummond. Your payment arrived moments after his. We apologize for the confusion." Moments. That was all it took for a lifetime's effort to vanish. Samuel hung up, staring at the wall until the light outside turned gray. He drove into town again, snow clinging to his coat as he pushed through the doors of the auction office. The clerk behind the counter avoided his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mr. Keene. 2 buyers. The system processed Drummond first." Samuel's voice was low. "You're saying I paid for a horse I'll never see." The clerk swallowed. "It happened, sir. Timing, that's all." He walked out without another word. The cold hit his face like a slap. Across the street, through the falling snow, he saw Caleb's truck loaded with supplies bound for his ranch. The man stood tall beside it, laughing with his men, unaware, or perhaps aware, of what he'd taken. Samuel's hands clenched at his sides, but he said nothing. By the time he reached Willow Bend, dusk had settled. He stood by the empty field, the paper still folded in his pocket, and whispered to the silent land, "I tried, Clara." The wind stirred the frost, carrying the faint scent of snow and something older, something waiting. And though he didn't know it yet, the story was far from over. The weeks that followed passed in a blur of frost and silence. Samuel moved through his days like a man half awake, the rhythm of chores keeping him from collapsing into thought. Each morning, he shoveled snow from the barn path, mended the same section of fence, checked the same empty stalls. Yet every task carried a hollow echo, as if purpose had fled the land. The papers from the bank lay folded in the drawer beside Clara's letter. 2 ghosts of promises broken in different ways. He no longer went to town. He had nothing left to trade except his pride, and that was the one thing he refused to sell. The newspaper arrived one afternoon, slipped through the slot with a thud that broke the quiet. On the front page was Caleb Drummond, beaming atop Silver Wind, the stallion gleaming like polished moonlight. The headline read, "Drummond Ranch acquires champion bloodline." Samuel stared at the picture until his vision blurred. He felt no hatred, only the dull ache of inevitability, like rain falling on ground that would never grow again. He set the paper aside and went out to the fields, where the horizon stretched cold and indifferent. Benji kept showing up despite Samuel's half-hearted protests. The boy's boots left deep tracks in the snow as he carried feed to the chickens, humming off-key tunes that belonged to warmer seasons. "You don't have to come," Samuel told him. "Ain't much left worth the trouble." Benji shrugged, wiping his nose with a gloved hand. "Still better than staying home. Mom says some things can't be fixed alone." The words landed heavier than he knew. Samuel said nothing, but when the boy left that evening, he watched him go with something close to gratitude. A letter arrived a few days later, tucked into the feed store delivery. The envelope bore the seal of the auction house. Samuel opened it slowly, expecting another apology, another reminder of loss. Instead, he found a correction notice, a printed statement acknowledging an internal error. His payment, it said, had been received first, though processed second. The rightful owner of the horse, by record, was him. His hand tightened around the page until the edges tore. Justice, too late. The words meant nothing now. The horse was gone, the damage already done. He placed a letter beside Clara's. Two truths that could not change the past. Martha visited that evening, her cheeks flushed from the cold. She saw the letter on the table and frowned. "You could fight this, Sam. With proof like that, you could take him to court." He shook his head. "I've had my share fights. Some you win by walking away." She studied him for a long moment, then said quietly, "You always were the stubborn kind." He almost smiled. "Keeps me breathing." The days lengthened. Snow melted into rivulets that cut through the fields, revealing patches of mud and dead grass beneath. Samuel began planting again, though the ground was reluctant to take seed. Benji brought friends from town to help, young hands with more hope than experience. The sight of them hammering posts, laughing as the wind caught their hats, stirred something faint but familiar in Samuel's chest, a pulse of belonging, the whisper of life returning. One night, thunder rolled across the valley, splitting the sky open. Rain poured down, drumming against the roof until the gutters overflowed. Samuel lay awake listening to the storm when he heard it, distant, frantic hoofbeats slicing through the wind. He grabbed his coat and lantern, stepping into the rain. Beyond the pasture, lightning flashed, illuminating a wild shape tangled in wire near the fence line. A horse, silver, trembling, eyes wide with terror. Silver Wind. Samuel moved slowly, voice low, steady. "Easy, boy. You're all right." The horse's flank bled where the wire had cut deep, muscles quivering. Samuel knelt, cutting through the tangled strands until the animal was free. The stallion staggered, then pressed its head lightly against his shoulder, shivering as rain slid off its mane. Samuel ran a hand down its neck, feeling the raw, desperate pulse beneath his palm. He looked toward the hills, where Drummond's ranch lights flickered dimly through the storm. For a long moment, he stood between past and mercy, between what was owed and what was right. Then he whispered, "You're safe here." The rain fell harder, blurring the world into silver and shadow. In that quiet, trembling space, Samuel realized that some things return not because we chased them, but because they remember where they were loved. Morning came soft and gray, the air washed clean by rain. The valley shimmered under a low mist, and from the open barn came the sound of slow breathing. The horse alive, resting. Samuel stood by the door with his hands braced on the frame, watching the rise and fall of Silver Wind's chest. The stallion had eaten little, but his eyes were calm now, his trust fragile and real. Samuel felt it like warmth seeping into cold wood. He filled the trough with fresh water, his movements careful, reverent. Every breath in that barn carried a quiet promise that not everything lost stays gone. By afternoon, word spread across the valley that Caleb Drummond's stallion had escaped. His truck appeared at the end of the lane, tires spitting mud. He stepped out in a slick coat, his face drawn from sleepless nights and anger held too long. "He came this way," Caleb said, voice clipped. Samuel nodded once and led him toward the barn. For a long moment, neither spoke. The horse lifted his head when Caleb appeared but did not move toward him. Instead, Silver Wind shifted closer to Samuel, his flank brushing the man's sleeve. The gesture said more than any argument could. Caleb's gaze hardened. "You could have kept him hidden," he said. "No one would have known." Samuel's voice was low, steady. "That's not how I was raised." The words hung between them, heavy with all the years that separated what they'd once been. Friends turned rivals by pride and grief. Caleb looked at the horse again, then at the man standing beside him. His voice cracked. "I was wrong to take him from you. I knew it then, too." Samuel didn't reply. Forgiveness, he learned, wasn't something you declared. It was something you lived. Rain began to fall again, soft and persistent. Caleb took a step back, his shoulders sagging. "Keep him," he said finally. "He's yours, Sam. Always was." He turned before Samuel could answer, the sound of his boots fading into the hush of rain. Samuel stayed where he was, stunned by the simplicity of the moment. After all the loss, after all the years of bitterness, the truth had arrived not with thunder, but with quiet surrender. Days passed. The valley dried, the fields greening again as spring pressed through the thaw. Silver Wind healed quickly under Samuel's care, his strength returning with each dawn. The two of them moved through the days as if guided by an unspoken rhythm, man and horse rebuilding one another. Benji came by with his usual chatter, bringing extra hay and a grin that refused to fade. "He's really yours now?" the boy asked one morning. Samuel smiled, the lines on his face softening. "Looks that way." Weeks later, a courier truck pulled into the yard carrying a sealed envelope. Inside was an official transfer deed, Caleb's signature in firm ink, legal and final. At the bottom, a note read, "For debt unpaid between old friends." Samuel stood a long while by the fence, the paper trembling slightly in his hand. He thought of the years that pride had stolen, the silence that might have ended everything if not for a horse that refused to stay where it didn't belong. That evening, the setting sun spilled gold across the pasture. Silver Wind trotted freely through the tall grass, made catching light like liquid fire. Samuel leaned against the fence post, breath slow, eyes soft. Beyond the pasture, the willow tree stood quiet, its branches trailing in the wind. He walked there, hat in hand, and placed a folded deed at the base of the headstone. "He came home, Clara," he murmured. "And so did I." Behind him, Benji laughed as silver wine circled the yard, the sound carrying through the open barn doors. The air smelled of hay and rain, of earth learning to live again. Samuel turned once more toward the horizon, where clouds broke to reveal a sky clear and wide. He felt Clara's promise settle at last within him, not as memory, but as presence. The land breathed, and so did he. When dusk fell, he lit the lantern by the window, its glow spilling softly across the table where her letter still lay. Outside, the horse snorted once and settled in the straw. Samuel whispered into the light, "Some dreams don't arrive when you pay for them. They arrive when you've earned them." And as night deepened around the valley, Willow Bend no longer felt like a place haunted by loss. It felt like home.